Yo, what's going on, you guys? This is your boy RBG, aka the Random Black Gamer, bringing you another video on Devil May Cry. As you guys are aware, we have a new TV show that's just over the horizon that's going to be hitting on Netflix, and there have been rumors swirling around the internet about Capcom possibly releasing another Devil May Cry video game, as well as rumors that this could potentially be a remake using Capcom's new RE engine. And today we're going to be talking about the latter because there's been a strong debate on which installment they should start off with, which in my honest opinion boils down to 3 installments from the PS2 era, which are Devil May Cry 1, Devil May Cry 2, and Devil May Cry 3. All of these games are solid classics that we can still go back and replay, but people would like to see what they would look like with that graphical facelift, as well as see some tweaks and some new features that we wish we could have gotten the first time around, but unfortunately didn't due to limitations. Something that I think is necessary to point out is that even though all 3 of these installments come from the PlayStation 2 era, they were developed by different teams, which in my honest opinion is why these games feel vastly different from one another. And the only ones that seem to have that consistency with one another would have to be Devil May Cry 3, 4, and 5, which were all developed by Hideyaka Itsano, who had partially worked on Devil May Cry 2, but was brought in at the tail end of the game's development, resulting in it feeling incomplete. Apparently, Itsano was so dissatisfied with his level of involvement in the final product of this game that he doesn't even consider himself the lead developer of it. And a lot of fans, including myself, have always wondered what this game would have been if it had a consistent and complete development phase, because it's the worst installment in the entire series, and a lot of people consider it the red-headed stepchild that Capcom refuses to acknowledge only when they absolutely have to acknowledge it. If there was any game from this series that needed a lot of work, it would absolutely have to be Devil May Cry 2, because you just can't go in and give this game a graphical overhaul. You have to completely change everything about it, because there's so much that's wrong with this, and simply placing a current gen graphical skin on the bones of something so broken would not work. Because instead of taking a few steps forward from the sequel, this game decided to take a few steps backwards by making the game extremely easy compared to its predecessor. There was literally no technique or strategy required in order to defeat the bosses, and the enemies were so spaced out between stages that it was next to impossible to get off a good combo. Instead of giving us new weapons and upgrades with their own advantages and disadvantages, we were basically reduced to using the same weapons all the way through. But the biggest downgrade would have to be Dante's overall personality, which was a stark contrast from what we saw from the previous installment. Instead of just being very confident and braggadocious, we got a character that had the personality of a wet blanket, which is a big no-no when it comes to making a Devil May Cry title, because you already have this universe at large that's very dark and serious all the time, which is why you have a loud and audacious character such as Dante to cut that tension and make things seem like they're exciting even if his life is at stake. But when you take away that element, everything in the game just feels very boring. Like, it's crazy that I'm even saying this, but the only character that I found exciting was the main villain Arius, and it's for all the wrong reasons. He's a character that was meant to be taken seriously, but due to his bad voice delivery, it made it very comical to watch. So if Capcom were to do a remake for this particular installment, I don't think there's a lot that people hold sacred when it comes to it. The only thing that I think fans would have a problem with them changing too much would have to be Dante's overall design. Like, in my honest opinion, that's by far the best costume that Dante has ever had. I will die on that hill, and I hope that we get a chance to see this costume brought back, because like I said, Capcom tends to treat this like the red-headed stepchild, which is totally understandable, but there's no reason why this costume wasn't brought back for any of the later titles. I would have loved to have seen it in Devil May Cry 5, since that's one of the first entries that they were able to use the RE engine on. Like, can you just imagine how fluid it would look, especially the tails of the coat? Like, they would just be kind of whirling around in the wind and moving as Dante moves swiftly across each stage. Just great stuff, man. So hopefully, if we are going to get a remake, that's one of the things that they don't alter. But everything else, they should definitely alter, especially Dante's personality, to make it more congruent with the things that we've seen in the other games. But moving on, the next installment I want to talk about is Devil May Cry 3, which I initially made a video on a few weeks ago talking about how it could potentially be remade, and I just said that because Devil May Cry 3 is by far the most popular installment that we have in this entire series, because it brought a lot of new things to the table as well as perfected certain things that were already brought from the previous installments. Everything that we loved about about Devil May Cry, such as its challenging enemies and bosses, were brought back in full effect, and even though Devil May Cry 2 was a game that we wanted to completely forget, we were reminded that it existed by way of the Rebellion sword for Dante, and itsano took it a step further by implementing things such as the wall running as well as the gun mechanics for Dante's trickster and gunslinger style. Plus, you can't go wrong with some of the newer elements such as Royal Guard. We got a more loud and infectious version of Dante, whose personality was so well received by the fans that it would go on to be the definitive template for the sequels, even though those characters were way older than the one we got in Devil May Cry 3. The gameplay is insanely fun even to this day, and there are still a lot of things that you can learn that you didn't necessarily pick up the first time you played the title, such as enemy step cancels and all these other combos that you can master. But the best part of it all would have to be the story mode, where we get a chance to see this young version of Dante in action, as well as go head to head with his twin brother Virgil, who we had already gotten introduced to in Devil May Cry 1, except this time we get more backstory on their long-standing rivalry. We also got the introduction to Lady, who has gone on to be a reoccurring character, so there's a lot to like about Devil May Cry 3, and I don't just say that this game should be remade just because of how popular it is. I say that because it would be awesome just to have these games made based on their timeline. Given the fact that DMC3 Dante is the youngest version of the character, it would be awesome to introduce him to a new set of fans, and it could essentially serve as a jumping off point for more remakes to be made for the sequels. For example, Metal Gear Solid Delta, it's based off of the third installment in the Metal Gear Solid series, Metal Gear Solid 3, and it's starting off with a remake, but that's another game that story takes place earlier than its predecessors. And I feel like that if it does well, then Konami will keep their foot on the gas and produce remakes for the other installments, except make them in chronological order based on those timelines. Because you're not only going to get those sales from the die-hard fans, you're also going to get it from the newcomers who want to see the story told in that particular format, which is why I strongly believe they should start off with Devil May Cry 3 as the first remake. Now, in regards to what they should change or adjust, I'm not quite sure on. Like, the most I can say is that they should just take everything that was good about Devil May Cry 5 and apply it to this, because Devil May Cry 5 for the most part is built on the bones that was already constructed with Devil May Cry 3. Like, if I were to alter anything, it would most likely be the styles and how you can utilize them mid-match as opposed to just selecting one style per stage / mission. In my honest opinion, that was one of the biggest crutches that came with the original game, not having access to a certain move because it's tailored to a specific style. So I would absolutely love to have the ability to switch any style I want mid-game. I also think it would be a cool idea to maybe combine certain styles, like put two in one. Like, I have a strong affinity towards the sword master and gunslinger style. It would be nice to just have all of those moves at my fingertips just in one play style. As far as everything else that needs to be worked about the game, I would basically just put a new skin on the motion captures that were already available for it. One of the things that I always hated about the original Devil May Cry 3 game is that we had some in-game cutscene cinematics, but a great deal of them were pre-rendered cutscenes, which stuck out like a sore thumb once we got the HD remasters. So it would be awesome to see all these sequences receive a graphical upgrade, as well as maybe add in some new camera angles to give it a more cinematic flair that they probably couldn't the first time around. But moving on, the last and final title that we have to talk about is the first entry in this series, Devil May Cry 1, which was originally directed and created by Hideki Kamiya. This is the title where we got formally introduced to Dante as well as Trish and Mundus. It was originally intended to be Resident Evil 4, but the developers felt its cool and over-stylized action didn't fit the world of Resident Evil, so they renamed it Devil May Cry and based the story after the Italian poem Divine Comedy, where the story describes Dante's travels through hell, purgatory, and heaven. And this game went on to be a critical success. It was heralded as one of the top action games of all time and would go on to be listed in the top 100 PlayStation 2 games of all time. Since you were graded on your performance for each stage, it encouraged you to replay them so you can get that S. I really enjoyed experiencing Dante, who was a new character at the time, as well as some of the things that he had to offer, like his sword, the Sparta, which is basically his father's sword. And we would go on to get another upgrade in the form of Alistair, which was basically a sword that we never really got a chance to see again for whatever reason. But now we actually do have the chance to see this thing everything again with a fresh new coat of paint. If you were to ask me what I would actually change about the overall presentation of the game, I would probably just say just do what they did with Resident Evil 2 and 3 and the 4 remake, where they do alter some of the cinematics and stuff since they are a bit dated. Like, I would love to see what they do with enemies such as Plasma Demon, which is basically this shape-shifting cyclops that can transform into different things such as a human and a bat. I would love to see how well that translates into this new modern era of gaming. We have already kind of seen certain things from Devil May Cry 1 with the RE engine, such as the Shadow, which will go on to be V's familiar from Devil May Cry 5, as well as Nello Angelo, who was basically Virgil trapped in this Machiavelli Black Knight armor. Anyways, in regards to the overall gameplay change up, I would basically apply the same thing that I said I would to Devil May Cry 2. It's just basically take what you see with Devil May Cry 3 through 5 and put it in that. It definitely wouldn't hurt to add in some new moves for Alistair and Ifrit, which I felt like should have definitely had more moves than it did, especially considering all the other gauntlets we would go on to get in later sequels. They could do a lot with that particular devil arm. I would also like to see something with Sparta himself. I feel like that's a character that just gets undercut in every Devil May Cry game. Like, we hear about him, but we don't necessarily get a chance to see him in action. It also wouldn't hurt to adapt things from the mangas and novels, where we get more on Dante's past and the early beginnings as a devil hunter. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. You can only heighten the experience of this already awesome game. But with all that said, guys, I'm going to turn it over to you. What do you think about these ideas? And which game would you pick to be remade first? Would it be Devil May Cry 1, Devil May Cry 2, or Devil May Cry 3? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, I ask you like or dislike the video. It doesn't have to be a thumbs up, it can be a thumbs down. But if you really enjoyed this video, it would help me out tremendously if you shared it with all your friends and followers on all the different social media outlets. Sharing really makes a difference. But once again, this is your boy RBG signing out on another video. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.